Hello and welcome to another episode of Metal Effort. My name's Nehemiah, and today we're going to be looking at this piece of metal, the Ochs Orca. This is a collaboration with Massdrop. First thing we want to do is get into our size comparisons so you know what we're working with. The PM2 and the Para 3 are making their usual appearance here. It's a pretty decently sized knife. Blade length is about 3.5 inches. So right in that middle range, good beefy knife. It's pretty thick, just looking at it compared to the PM2 even. It's quite a lot thicker than the PM2, surprisingly, which isn't necessarily a thin knife by any stretch of the imagination. Blade stock is also pretty thick, so we'll do a measurement with that. One other thing I want to bring up is just another big beefy knife, the Shaman. Another Massdrop knife, which they've rebranded themselves as Drop, just a single word. But, I'll keep saying both so people kind of know what I'm talking about until it's common knowledge. This is a Massdrop Keen, and one of my favorites off of Massdrop. So I might compare it to the Keen, even though they're very different knives on the surface. I think at the end of the video, we'll kind of talk about some of the similarities just in philosophy behind them. So be on the lookout for that at the end of the video. Let's do some measurements real quick. I want to talk about the thickness on this blade stock. So 0.16, if we do millimeters, about a little over 4 millimeters. Should be 4, really. With the tape, I guess we took the tape off. 4 millimeters, it's hard to make that seem like a thin knife. You have to have a really tall blade with a huge grind to really make it super duper slicey. So we know going into it, that's kind of working against it in terms of sliciness. We'll see how that all plays out. Do a quick weigh-in. Now, this is the CF version. There's two different kind of trims, bunch of different colors, but two different physical differences. One is G10 with titanium clip and pivot collar. This is the blinged out CF version, so it weighs a little bit less, coming in at 4.5 ounces, basically. Definitely over an ounce, an inch, but it's better than the normal one, which isn't quite 5 ounces. It only goes up like maybe 0.25 ounces. Switching from the CF to the G10. With the objective stuff out of the way, let's get into the dent, the decent, the excellent, the nitpicks, and the terrible of this piece of metal. First off in the decent is the blade shape. Now, I really like the blade shape. That's one of the things I have to be attracted to if I'm even going to consider buying a knife or trying a knife out. And, this kind of passes the internet test, I suppose. Good long belly, good tip, a little bit of flats, not a ton. Giant harpoon swedge. It's high enough grind that I wasn't too worried about it being, really thick. Blade stock. The Shaman performed pretty good, and it seems like, it was only just a little bit shorter of a grind than the Shaman for cutting. And, the shape of the blade plays in its favor. The sliciness is just not really there. There's a lot of things kind of getting in the way. Obviously, you have the physical thumb studs. You can unscrew these. I did unscrew them, and you could just remove them completely. And you got like a little tiny hole, miniature spider hole for like little aliens to be able to spider flick it out, I guess. I don't know. And it's kind of thick. It's kind of thick and girthy back here. So it's, for slicing, you got so much belly that, cutting into like food prep, cheese, that kind of thing, it wasn't really the best. But it's definitely a decent cutter in general. Utility cuts, this thing's pretty good. It's nice. It's a high enough grind that it gets the job done. So obviously with the big swedge, it's going to help with the piercing cuts. So getting into like clamshell or something like that is not a problem. Just cutting open boxes and things like that, cardboard, you could shred through that stuff pretty easily. It's really the slicing part that, you shouldn't have really high expectations for this particular blade doing those kind of cuts. Otherwise, fine. It's decent. The steel type used on this is RWL 34, which I'm going to put in the decent. It's a solid stainless steel. It's kind of simple. It's as far as, good powdered steels go, it's kind of like CPM 154. So it's good. It's fine. It's not going to rock anybody's world. It's not new and exciting or different. But for the G10 version being $200, I think RWL is definitely adequate at that price. This blinged out version is coming in at $325. So no steel type change between the two trims, but the finish on the blade is different. So this has the satin finish. If you get the G10 version, it's going to be just kind of a stonewash finish. So, that's totally personal preference there on that. But the satin is well done. It does play with the light nicely, and it's not going to have any issues with corrosion, I don't think. Overall, I'm okay with RWL at this price point, I suppose. Next thing I like to mention, and this is kind of a 2-for-1, is the Moku tie, options that I took advantage of here. The options themselves, but also just the fact that there are options. I really like how Massdrop, aka Drop, is really giving the customer a lot of choices and color combinations, and oftentimes material types like this, and it just makes the purchasing a little bit more specialized. And maybe a particular color configuration speaks to some people, but it's just like a deal breaker for somebody else. So being able to change some of the options, I think, is good. That's good for the customer, and I want that to continue. As far as the actual Mokume here, it's beautiful. They have kind of two trims. This is the purple one, so purple ano on the pivot collar and the thumb studs. There's also a blue one. I like purple knives. I don't know what it is. I'm a fan of purple. I like blue too, but purple on a knife, I guess, is a little bit more rare. But now everybody's saying that, so I don't know. It's beautiful though. I mean, you buff it up, and it plays with the light really, really well. If you there you go. Very, very nice. The clip is really easy to clean off and get, looking really nice. The pivot, on the other hand, the anodizing on the actual screw part, it's going to be really hard to wipe that stuff off. The collar with the Moku tie is also there. That's good. You can see it, but you have to get pretty close. Otherwise, it just it looks like maybe just straight anodized. But it's there. You can see it. It's not as obvious as on the clip. So just a little bit of bling. I like how, it's somewhat subtle, being mostly just carbon fiber, black carbon fiber with a satin blade. You have to really pick it up and hold it to really notice these things going on. So like the options, and like the particular option that I chose, I'm pretty happy with. One of the other changes on this particular trim is that the back spacer is going to be CF instead of G10. I honestly couldn't care. I guess it's a little bit more lightweight, I suppose, but you can hardly tell. There's so much machining going on the back spacer that it's hard to tell that it's made out of carbon fiber. If you get close, you could see the layers, but the back spacer is decent. It's got some traction to the back. It's well set in. No complaints about the back spacer whatsoever. I guess it's nice knowing that it's CF, but not necessarily something that I needed, but it's fine. Last thing I'm going to talk about in the decent is the fit and finish. And, is definitely not one of the fit and finishes that would make it into the excellent. Normally, I don't like putting fit and finish in the excellent unless it really deserves it. This is definitely not even close. You have some basic good things that you want to see from, a mass-produced knife. It's centered. Action, we'll get into the details of the action, but everything feels good. It's mechanically sound by all respects. There's a lot that they're trying to do on the knife, and so I want you to just to kind of take note that most things going on here are good. The hardware was easy to take apart and put back together. Everything lined up and fit perfectly without me having to finagle it, which is a good sign of fit and finish. I'm gonna have some nitpicks that I'll get into later. But considering how ambitious this is for such an inexpensive knife, for Massdrop to kind of take on and have Reate produce, I'm impressed, but still objectively noticing the problem. So overall, it's going to be in the decent. All right, let's get into the excellent. And we're going to talk about the OCD, which is the open, the close, and the disengage. Let's start with the open. This knife has a lot of things going for it in the open category. So first off, you've got thumb studs on both sides. So it's ambidextrous in the opening, I suppose, even though you can't move the clip. It's kind of weird. I guess you can keep it in your right pocket, but use it left-handed, I suppose. It is like you've seen me do it here. It's totally spidey, flickable, and it's pretty easy to get there. There's plenty of clearance between the thumb stud and the side of the knife. So when I'm sticking my finger in there, it's kind of hard to give you that angle, but it's plenty of room. I'm not having to do finger gymnastics to get it in there. I have to do finger gymnastics to show you, but that feels pretty much at home. It's a little bit sharp, but it's grabbing on good. And I do fidget the knife and open it this way quite a lot, probably half the time. You have the normal, traditional way to open it. This I don't like as much. It's a little bit harder to get your thumb in there the right way. I've been kind of playing with directly up, a little off to the side has been the way to go, but it's definitely not something I'm like looking to do successfully anyway, so I don't practice that very often. I think if I really focused on it, I could make it more reliable, but I just don't enjoy it. It tears up your thumb when you do it, and I'd rather keep it on my index finger for the flipper tab or middle finger for the spider flick and save my thumb. For the flipper tab is, pretty normal, I guess, as far as just design. There's nothing super innovative going on here, but it is very functional. Little, mostly flat shelf, no jimping on it, but I don't think it needs it. It's definitely light switch. You can kind of push button it, but hurts your finger to do that. I would recommend just doing a direct, 12 o'clock to 6 o'clock, like light switch. Not a problem. The detent on this sucker is pretty strong. It might even be a problem for some people. I always prefer it to be a little bit more of a hard detent than less. If I had to choose between the two, it means that your action is super authoritative. It's coming out. It's flying out hard and strong. The opening part of that is, I think, strictly better in terms of how hard the detent is, but it does have a negative effect, which I'll kind of get into the disengage, and you'll see what I mean. The lock bar, the liner lock, is, a lot of force going down. That's definitely a hard detent. And so it takes some force, even though they give you a really good wide chamfer in here to get in. And these are flat. There isn't more milling on this side of the scale to give you access to that liner lock as much as I would want them to. I think that would definitely help out the access of it, but it's not terrible. It's not like I'm, when I'm putting my thumb in there, it's like getting totally pinched by this or this just by putting my finger there. But I can tell that it takes a lot of force to actually push the lock bar over just from that really hard detent. So, or at least it's a hard detent, and it's because of the lock bar, pressure. Sometimes that's not the case. You can have a really hard detent and not have it be because the lock bar is just really far over and has lots of tension. The issue I'm having is that when you go in to actually move it over, you have to be really careful not to get your thumb meat in between the scale and the outside of the lock bar. And you can kind of see some human remains right there. I have pinched my thumb really good twice, and I'm very careful now, but it makes me very gingerly go in for the disengage, just because you need to give it some good, gusto to get it moved over. But if you push in here as opposed to here, it's just gonna grab that meat and pinch it really, really bad. So this is the biggest thing that's kind of holding back the action from just being stellar across the board. There is a little bit of a detent ball jump to get on, but it stops, pretty early on. So it's not an issue to get the detent ball onto the tang of the blade. It's just the actual disengage of the lock bar. It wants to push itself back up and click back in just because this is so tight. Now, once it's there, the closing is pretty decent. You've got bearings in here, and it's pretty smooth. One normal jostle should get the job done. Considering that detent ball is being really pushed into the side of the blade, I think this is pretty good. It's very good on the close. Ultimately, opening is the best, closing is the second best, and disengage is a little iffy just because you gotta really be mindful of what you're doing. And once you pinch yourself, the feeling that you have of making sure not to pinch yourself, I think, is more annoying than the actual threat itself. So if that makes sense, it's just making sure you don't do it. That, takes some mental brain power to make sure you don't do it wrong. The next thing I'd like to talk about in the excellent is the value, but only for the G10 model. I think the G10 is, for $200, is pretty good. I think that, this being basically a replica of the custom variant that Ochs Worx is making, putting out, I think that's pretty good. I think this is definitely, a solid knife. It has a lot going for it. And, $200 is not that bad for something that's doing a really good, competent job. It really comes down to how much you're enamored with the design, if that really is going to, be in your decent or in your excellent. But I'll give them a pass on this one just because you have a blinged out version and you have a normal kind of utility version, and you get to pick. If this was the only version available for $325, I probably wouldn't have it this high. I would say it's just a decent price for what you're getting. It does feel a lot more premium than that price point would suggest, even the $320 one. So I don't feel too bad about putting it in the excellent. Okay, now we're going to get into the nitpicks. I mentioned the issue with the disengaging. That's kind of the first one. The second thing is just how thick the knife is. I showed you the blade thickness and alluded to the thickness of the actual knife itself. It makes the shaman look thin and slim. So I don't want to insinuate that this is strictly bad. It does fill the hand, which is, potentially good. It depends on your personal preferences. But ultimately, it's kind of a potato in your pocket. It's not particularly deep carry. It's about here, hanging out. But that isn't as big of an issue as just how much space this is taking up in your pocket. You got the swedge, which is kind of protruding a little bit, and it's kind of up here, so your pocket, is usually you tuck your blade in there, but this kind of wants to rock it out a little bit because of the swedge. Where if the swedge wasn't there, I think it would kind of tuck itself in a little bit more. It's okay, it's fine, but the flipper tab, the thickness of it, it wasn't necessarily like the best knife to carry. It's fine. It's okay. The weight is all right. It kind of makes up for it, but something you should be mindful of. The lanyard hole is kind of leaving me to be desired. It's in my least favorite spot. It's taking precedence over the clip, and it's kind of small. The edges are a little bit sharp on both sides. It just seems like they're like, oh wait, the lanyard hole, let's drill a hole. It doesn't seem like it's a part of the design. They just screwed a hole into the knife. So drilled a hole rather. So I don't like lanyard holes personally, but I'm kind of offended by this one. I'm putting it in the nitpick for that. Not a big fan of the faux bolster. Now, the CF, the marbled part, I really like. And I probably should have mentioned this in the decent, but this part is good. It's just permanently connected. It's all one solid piece of carbon fiber to this faux bolster. Now, the faux bolster, why am I having such a hard time saying that? Faux bolster. Sheesh. That itself isn't like the end of the world for me personally, but the little, gouges they've got in here, kind of like dimpling almost like on a metal piece, but they're just kind of scooping it out or whatever. It looks okay. It plays with the light, but the issue is on the edges, and this is going to be really hard to see, but on the edges, it kind of creates these little sharp points all the way around the edge of the knife. Like right here is pretty sharp. But you kind of, sometimes you rub up against it and you're like, oh, am I touching the blade? No. Oh, okay. That's the bolster. It's just not completely, finished, in the way that I think it should have been as far as like chamfered. It's not really something I can easily do with CF. I got to be careful with that. But again, it's not terrible. I didn't cut myself on it or anything like that. It's just, I don't know. I'd just rather have it all be this marbled CF the whole way. And I think it would have killed two birds with one stone. So that's kind of a bummer. Next thing I want to talk about is the ergonomics. Now, overall, it's pretty good. At first I was holding it, I don't know, for maybe the first hour of messing around with it. I was like, yeah, this is really good. There's no jimping, but I don't think you really need it. The problem is that after a long period of use, or if you just really bear down on it, the little hump right here is just in a spot where your pinky doesn't, or at least my pinky, doesn't quite get on this side. And it would just pull me way too far back on the knife. So all my fingers end up wanting to be scrunched up together. I put any pressure here and my pinky is just, sliding down, bunking into my other fingers, which scrunches them all up. So afterwards, I kind of feel like I've got like old lady claw hands. If you have small hands, I think this would be really good. But I have medium hands. I know a lot of people that have bigger hands than I do, and I think that would be a major issue for them. Unless your hands are so big that your pinky's back here, then I think it'd be fine. So I don't know. You kind of have to roll the dice on whether this would fit your hands or not. It's not universal, I don't think. Last nitpick is the botched sharpening. This is from the factory. It's going to be really hard. I'll see if I can zoom in and pull this off here. Okay. Yeah, you might be able to see that. So right here, you'll see there's a different like grit finish kind of at an angle. What happened was they sent these out. We had one floating around for the pass around group. This is not a pass around. This is one I just purchased directly from Massdrop. And the heel, a good chunk of it, was not sharpened, like at all. It was just, you could see like the squared off edges. So I think they realized that either they meant to do that and then changed their mind, or they weren't checking it as they were doing it and realized the machine had like been programmed incorrectly, or the guy who was doing it thought that was normal. I don't know. So it looks like they grabbed all their knives and then put them back under the stone to try to sharpen that out and get it apexed. So the knife is sharp, but it's very uneven. So if you're somebody that's not really comfortable, sharpening your knife right out of the box, this might be really annoying to you. Just how uneven it is, and it's like visibly different. It cuts. I don't want to insinuate that it's not, sharp. It's sharp, but maybe not as even as you would like it to be, for long-term use. I don't have anything in the terrible, so I think we should go right on to the conclusions. I like this knife. I was really smitten by it online, but there are some things that just kind of annoy me. I mean, once I pinched my thumb the second time on this thing, I kind of soured on the knife a bit. It's not that big of a deal. It's just frustrating that I have, if I could come at it from a side a little bit easier, if this was carved out a little bit, I wouldn't have my thumb kind of where it could be pinched. Or if this wasn't so close or sharp or next to it, I don't know. This needed to be up, raised a little bit. There's a lot of ways to fix that problem. It just makes me not want to fidget with the knife because I'm always kind of, worried about doing it again. It's just a bite that you don't want. So I'm just been conditioned not to really want to use the knife. It's beautiful. I think it's a very good looking knife. It, in short bursts is a pretty comfortable knife. It has a very usable, competent blade shape. Nothing about it is making me say, wow, this is unique. This is the only place to get this, combination of qualities at this price. Even though I like the price overall, I think that, you look at the little fit and finish snafus. It's a well-designed knife, I think. It's just the execution of it maybe wasn't as good. I don't like the bolster. I don't like the lanyard hole. There's certain things that, just kind of bother me. So I don't know if I would give this a full recommendation, like a blind one. But if you're like over the moon about having a Mokutai clip and pivot for 325, and you're okay with RWL 34, I think this is like a kind of a luxury knife on the cheap. It makes me think of like a really nice Kia or something, where you don't think Kia luxury, but there are Kias that are luxurious. So I don't know. I should be higher on the knife than I am. I don't want you to get the wrong impression. It's a solid knife. I'm just a little bit disappointed by a few things. Ultimately, the thing I just can't shake is how much more I like the Keen, and the Keen is $140, maybe $145. It might have gone up by like $10, something like that. But still, even comparing it to the G10 version of the Orca, I mean, you're like $50-$60 below it, and you're getting S35VN. You're getting an excellent blade shape that's a lot thinner, a lot more usable. It's not as flashy by any means, but it's just solid. The action is better on all three. I think opening is about the same, but disengage and close are definitely better on the Keen. Different animals, but as far as knives you can get on drop for that are a good value, I think this is even better value than the Orca. Obviously, there's a lot of stuff that you're not having to pay for. You don't have a blinged out Keen here, so I don't know. Take your pick. If you've got a Keen and you really like what's going on here, I don't think there's any reason not to say go ahead and buy it if you want it, but not blowing any worlds. All right, everybody, that's all I've got for you today. I hope this was helpful for you. I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.